We have this very interesting interaction between these languages. We think that the text probably originally is a Greek text because to honor the pharaoh as a god.
The Rosetta Stone was the key to understanding a lost world. But when AI reanalyzed the ancient slab, it pointed to something historians could not ignore.
What was found here, with the help of artificial intelligence, could change the way we understand history.
For centuries, the Rosetta Stone has been our bridge to ancient Egypt, a linguistic miracle that decoded hieroglyphs and brought a silent civilization back to life. But now, AI technology is detecting micro-patterns, erased carvings, and hidden layers of meaning beneath the surface in ways no human ever could. What it revealed has left historians both fascinated and alarmed, because the bargain carved into the Rosetta Stone may not be the story we were told. The broken stone that unlocked Egypt. Long before artificial intelligence entered the picture, the Rosetta Stone had already become one of the most important discoveries in human history. It was found broken and buried in the middle of a military campaign. Its top was missing, its edges were damaged. Yet the words carved into that dark slab would unlock a lost language and help give ancient Egypt its voice back. The stone itself looks simple at first. It is a dark piece of hard rock called granodiorite, about 3 feet 8 inches tall, about 2 feet 6 inches wide, and about 11 inches thick. It weighs roughly 1,675 pounds. Covering its surface was a message written in 3 distinct sections. At the top are Egyptian hieroglyphs, the sacred symbols carved in the shape of birds, eyes, reeds, hands, seated figures, and sacred objects. They looked like images, but they were not just drawings. They are the symbols people often connect with Egypt's tombs, temples, and pharaohs. Then came Demotic, the middle section of the stone. Demotic looked nothing like the grand signs above it. It was faster, simpler, and more practical. It was an Egyptian way of writing used for daily records, letters, contracts, accounts, and other work that kept life moving. At the bottom is Ancient Greek. The stone was discovered in July 1799 near Rashid, the Egyptian town Europeans called Rosetta. French soldiers were working around Fort Saint-Julien during Napoleon's campaign in Egypt when the slab appeared. A French officer named Pierre-François Bouchard saw that it was not just another old stone. The same message appeared in different scripts, making the stone valuable immediately. After centuries of mystery, this broken stone looked like the key to reading ancient Egyptian writing. Hieroglyphs had gone out of normal use after the old temple world faded and the knowledge of how to read them slowly vanished. The signs were still everywhere. They stood on temple walls, royal statues, coffins, tombs, and stone gates. But the people looking at them could not properly hear what they were saying. That is why the Greek text mattered so much. Scholars could still read ancient Greek. If the same decree appeared in Greek and Egyptian scripts, then names, phrases, and patterns could be compared. As copies of the inscription spread, scholars slowly began unlocking the meaning of ancient Egyptian writing. One of the first major steps came from Thomas Young. He studied the royal name Ptolemy and helped show that some hieroglyphs could stand for sounds, not just ideas or pictures. That was a huge break from the old belief that the signs were only mysterious symbols. Then Jean-François Champollion pushed the work much further. In 1822, he showed that hieroglyphs were part of a full writing system. They could record sounds, words, and meanings. His knowledge of Coptic helped him understand that the symbols were not just pictures. They represented a real language. That breakthrough changed the study of Egypt forever. The carvings on temples and tombs were no longer just beautiful marks. But the Rosetta Stone was never made for future scholars. It was a public message meant to be seen and believed. It praised a king, strengthened his rule, and turned words into power. And that king was a young ruler whose throne was already under pressure. The boy king behind the stone. The stone made Ptolemy V sound like a ruler no one could question. It praised him as strong, blessed, generous, and chosen for power. But behind that polished image was a much weaker truth. The king at the center of the Rosetta Stone was still a boy. He was about 13 when the decree connected to the Rosetta Stone was issued in 196 BC. He had inherited one of the richest kingdoms in the ancient world, but he did not inherit peace. He sat on a throne built by a foreign dynasty, surrounded by palace men who wanted control, priests who held deep local power, and rebels who did not accept the world his family had created. That family had come from far outside Egypt's oldest royal line. More than a century earlier, Alexander the Great had conquered Egypt in 332 BC. After Alexander died, his empire broke into pieces, and one of his generals, Ptolemy I, took Egypt for himself. His descendants became the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek-speaking royal family ruling a land with a far older memory of kings, gods, temples, and sacred rule. So Ptolemy V was called Pharaoh, but his house was not born from the old Egyptian line. A king could sit in Alexandria and command armies, but he still needed Egypt's sacred world to accept him. Ptolemy's own childhood made that need even sharper. His father, Ptolemy IV, died when the boy was still very young. His mother, Arsinoe III, was murdered during the struggle around the throne. That left the child king in the middle of a court filled with rival factions battling for power. Outside Egypt, trouble grew too. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire seized Coele Syria, a key land the Ptolemies had fought to keep. The boy king was not only facing unrest at home, his kingdom was also shrinking abroad at a frightening speed. During the late reign of his father, native resistance grew across parts of Egypt. In the south, Upper Egypt became a serious problem for the dynasty. The young ruler needed people to believe he was not a helpless child, not a foreign heir, and not a weak figure moved around by stronger adults. He needed to appear like the rightful ruler of Egypt itself. The priests were the key to that image. Egyptian kingship was never just about wearing a crown. It was tied to the gods in the temples. Priests controlled the rituals that made that idea feel real. Their support could make a Greek king look like a true Egyptian pharaoh. And the priests had their own needs. They lived under a royal house that controlled money, law, soldiers, and public favor. The throne needed their sacred approval, but they also needed the throne's protection. Both sides had reasons to stand together, even in a kingdom full of pressure. The Rosetta Stone was born out of that alliance. The bargain carved in stone. The bargain began at Memphis, one of the oldest royal cities in Egypt. The king's side of the bargain was generous on purpose. Ptolemy V is shown as a ruler who supported the temples and restored what they needed. The decree says he renewed financial help, increased priestly support, reduced certain taxes, and removed some burdens from temple life. It also presents him as a ruler who cared for sacred animals and protected important religious traditions. In a land where worship touched almost every part of public life, those promises were powerful. He also offered mercy. The decree praises him for granting amnesty to some prisoners and people caught in unrest. That kind of mercy helped soften the image of a ruler whose kingdom had been shaken by revolt. It made him appear not only strong enough to defeat enemies, but kind enough to forgive. Money and religion were tied together here. A temple needed offerings, land, workers, records, and steady support to function. Priests needed income and protection to keep rituals alive. When Ptolemy supported the temples, he was not only doing a religious duty, he was strengthening the very network that could make his rule feel natural to Egyptians. The priests gave him that voice. They honored Ptolemy with royal and divine language. They treated his rule as part of Egypt's sacred order, not just a command from a Greek-speaking palace. They ordered images of him to be placed in temples, where his presence could be seen even when he was nowhere near the people. The decree connects him with the role of protector of Egypt, a title that made him sound less like a foreign heir and more like a guardian of the land. Those images were not simple decoration. Priests were to care for them through regular rituals. They were to serve them 3 times each day, as part of temple life. The king's birthday and the day of his accession were also to be honored with repeated celebrations. In some temples, the king's image was to stand beside the image of the local god, so royal power appeared close to divine power. The decree also ordered priests to give these images sacred clothing and care. This made the king part of the daily rhythm of worship. The priests were not simply giving all this away. Their own position became stronger through the same decree. The temples received public recognition. Their privileges were protected. Their role in Egypt's religious life was confirmed in front of everyone who saw the stone. By honoring the king, they also secured their place inside his kingdom. Both sides were using the same words, but each side needed something different from them. The decree also turns violence into order. It praises Ptolemy for defeating rebels and restoring peace, yet the stone we know today was not the full monument. The stone before Rosetta. Before the Rosetta Stone became famous, it had already been broken, moved, and stripped from the place where it was meant to stand. The slab French soldiers found near Rashid was not the whole monument. It was only the surviving lower part of a much larger stone, one piece of an upright stela that had once carried a fuller and more complete message. A stela was a standing stone slab made to hold words in a public place. It was not meant to be handled like a book or stored away like a private record. It was built to stand where people could see it. The Rosetta Stone began that way. The full monument was probably much taller than the broken slab that survives today. Based on similar decree stones, the original stela may have stood around 6.5 feet high. The upper section is gone. The missing part likely held more than words. It may have carried a rounded top, a sacred winged disc, and a carved scene showing the king before the gods. The stone itself still shows signs of that first life. Its front face was smoothed so the text could be carved across it. Its back is rougher, less finished, because that side was not made to impress a crowd. It was almost certainly not first placed at Rashid, the town where it was later found. The stronger view is that it came from a temple site farther inland in the Nile Delta, possibly Sais, an old royal and religious center. Sais had deep importance in Egypt's later history, and a decree like this would have belonged naturally in a temple setting. Then time did what time often does to monuments. The temple world changed. Old sacred spaces were closed, damaged, abandoned, or reused. The stone that once carried royal and religious meaning became useful as building material. Across Egypt, older monuments were often broken down and reused in later walls, forts, houses, and foundations. At some point, the larger stela broke. The missing pieces were never recovered. The most damaged area is the top. That is where the hieroglyphic text sits, and that is the part that suffered the worst loss. Only 14 lines of hieroglyphs survive. The middle section, written in Demotic, keeps 32 lines. The Greek section at the bottom keeps 54 lines, though parts near the lower edge are also damaged. The result is strange. The most sacred-looking part of the stone is also the part most badly reduced, and it was not alone. The kingdom wanted this message repeated. It wanted the decree placed where religion already had power. It wanted people in different temple towns to meet the same royal story in a sacred setting. Other copies and related versions of the decree help prove this wider picture. One important example is the Nubaira stele, a damaged limestone copy of the same Memphis decree. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, it preserves hieroglyphic material that helps show what parts of the missing upper text may have looked like. Another version was found at Philae, where parts of the decree were carved into temple walls. Some versions are damaged, some are partial, some were carved on walls instead of freestanding stelae. Some preserve details that others lost. No single copy holds everything perfectly. Then came the battle over who would own the Rosetta Stone. The fight over the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone helped the world hear ancient Egypt again, but the stone itself is not in Egypt. It sits in London inside the British Museum, far from the town where it was found and far from the land whose language it helped unlock. To millions of visitors, it is one of the most famous objects on Earth. To many Egyptians, it is something more painful, a piece of their own past taken during an age when foreign powers were fighting over Egypt. Its modern journey began with Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1798, he invaded Egypt with soldiers, ships, weapons, and ambition. But he did not bring only an army. They studied temples, copied inscriptions, drew monuments, measured ruins, collected objects, and recorded the land in great detail. The work they produced changed European knowledge of Egypt, but it happened during a military invasion. That is the world in which the Rosetta Stone returned to history. Then the war turned against the French. British and Ottoman forces defeated them in Egypt, and the fate of the Rosetta Stone changed with the fate of the army that had found it. Under the agreement made after the French surrender in 1801, the stone passed into British hands along with other antiquities. It was not moved because the Egyptians chose to send it away. It moved because foreign powers fought, negotiated, and divided the spoils of a failed campaign. Even its journey out of Egypt carried the feeling of a trophy. The stone was shipped to Britain aboard a captured French vessel, and when it reached London, it did not go straight into ordinary public display. It first went to the Society of Antiquaries, where scholars gathered around it as one of the most important puzzles in Europe. Plaster casts were made so the inscription could be studied in other places. Copies went to major universities, and printed versions of the text spread farther still. The stone arrived in Britain in 1802. From there, it entered the British Museum and became one of the museum's greatest treasures. By the end of that same year, it was no longer only a scholar's problem, it was a public object. People could come and see the actual slab that had opened a path back into ancient Egyptian writing. The Rosetta Stone was now a captured artifact, a research tool and a public symbol all at once. Crowds came to see it. Students learned its story. Its name became so famous that Rosetta Stone came to mean any key that helps unlock a hard mystery. Inside the museum, it was later given the number EA24, a plain catalog mark for an object that had become anything but plain. But that fame also made the wound deeper. The stone had helped reveal Egypt's ancient voice, yet the original stood in a foreign museum. For much of its museum life, the stone was not sealed behind modern protection the way it is today. Earlier visitors could get far closer to it. Some wanted more than a distant look. They wanted contact with the object itself. That public hunger helped make the stone harder to protect. A museum object can be studied quietly, but a world-famous object draws crowds, hands, cameras, pressure, and constant attention. The Rosetta Stone became too important to leave exposed like an ordinary display piece. Today, the original is protected in a case in the Egyptian Sculpture Gallery, while a replica is available elsewhere for people to touch. In 1917, when bombing threatened London during the First World War, the museum sent the Rosetta Stone underground with other important objects. For about 2 years it stayed in a postal tube railway station near Holborn, roughly 50 feet below the city. After the danger passed, it came back above ground, carrying yet another layer of history on top of the ancient one. For many Egyptians, the stone is a symbol of identity. It carries the name of an Egyptian town. It carries Egyptian writing. It helped the modern world read Egyptian history again, yet the country that produced it does not hold the original. That is why Egyptian voices have continued to call for its return. Those calls have come from archaeologists, historians, and cultural campaigners. Zahi Hawass has repeatedly pushed for the return of major Egyptian artifacts abroad, including the Rosetta Stone. Monica Hanna and others have argued that Egypt's heritage should not still be shaped by decisions made during the era of empire. That debate continues today. One side argues that the stone is well preserved and accessible to a global audience in London. The other argues that it should be returned to Egypt, the country whose history and language it helped reveal. Modern technology has made the debate even more complicated. Today, people can study high-quality images, casts, scans, and digital models without standing in front of the original. Knowledge can travel farther than ever before. A student in Cairo, London, New York, or Lagos can see details that once required access to a museum room. But a copy is still a copy. A scan can share information, but it cannot replace the original object's weight, history, and meaning. And now the Rosetta Stone has entered the age of artificial intelligence. The stone meets AI. The Rosetta Stone has already passed through the hands of priests, kings, soldiers, scholars, and museums. Now it has entered a new age where computers can help researchers study ancient writing faster than ever. They can search through thousands of symbols, spot patterns, compare damaged inscriptions, and suggest what missing words might have been. Instead of starting from scratch, scholars can use these tools to narrow down possibilities and work through ancient texts more quickly. Tools like Fabricius are already helping researchers do that with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Its work is focused on helping people learn, explore, and work with hieroglyphs by using machine learning to recognize signs and connect them with possible meanings. That is useful because hieroglyphs are not simple pictures. A single sign can work as a sound, a word, or a clue that helps explain the kind of word being used. Ithaca does something similar, but it was built for ancient Greek texts, not Egyptian hieroglyphs. It can restore missing text, suggest where an inscription may have come from, and help place it within a time range. Tests showed that it could identify original locations with about 71% accuracy and help date inscriptions to within about 30 years of the ranges proposed by historians. These tools are useful because they can handle huge amounts of material quickly. Another real example comes from the Herculaneum scrolls, the ancient papyrus rolls buried and burned by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Many of those scrolls were too fragile to open by hand. Modern scans and machine learning have helped researchers detect hidden ink inside the rolled layers without physically unwrapping them. That kind of work shows what machines can do best: find faint patterns inside damaged material, and make unreadable evidence easier to study. The best results still come when the machine works beside trained people. A program can narrow the search. A scholar can judge the meaning. That partnership is powerful because ancient texts are rarely clean. They can be chipped, faded, copied, reused, or broken into pieces long before anyone tries to read them. A machine can suggest what a missing word might be. It can find a pattern. It can compare lines from old texts. But the final judgment still belongs to people who understand the language, the history, the religion, and the world around the words. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.